Since the previous video where I worked on the background, this picture has now progressed on quite a long way. So let's now take a look at what's been done to get it to this stage. Although the eye is one of the smallest parts of the picture, I also feel it's one of the most important, so that's a good place to start. Using an old blending stump, I apply tone to the surrounding area. This can then be darkened further using a blunt 2B pencil, as this will help to create more definition. If any adjustment does need to be made, this can very simply be done by using a kneadable eraser. Once I'm happy with the amount of dark tone that's been applied, I can then start to work on the actual eye itself, again starting with the blending stump. This is a relatively gentle and non-invasive way to apply tone to the surface, and it can also be easily manipulated with the kneadable eraser. This is an ideal tool to use when it comes to very accurately drawing tone back out to refine the shape further, as well as also maintaining areas which are going to feature prominent highlights. It's important to maintain a glassy appearance, so to do this I'm using a blunt 2B pencil to very lightly apply tone to the darkest areas. The blending stump is then used to brush some of this tone down into the grain of the paper. With each layer the tone strengthens further, producing a smooth, even appearance. Again, slight alterations are regularly made using the kneadable eraser. Now this is quite time consuming for what is a very small area of the picture, but after a few more layers I'm very happy with the result that I've got. For a break I'll work on other parts of the picture which don't require as much intense focus. For example, here I'm blocking in tone around the whiskers. This is just simply working between the 2B and blending stump to create a base, which can then be refined later as the picture develops. So after a few days of working on other parts of the picture, I went back to working on the eye. The tone first wants to be darkened a bit further, so to do this I'm just using a 4B pencil. I don't want to diminish the strength of the tone this time, so I only blend out the edges. Equally, because of the strength of tone that was previously built up, this only requires one or maybe two layers of 4B to achieve the desired result. And as before, any highlights can be re-established or alterations made with a kneadable eraser. This gives highlights a soft edge, but if I want a harsher appearance, I can just use the electric eraser. This is ideal when it comes to creating highlights that have a harder edge to them. Shadow is added to some areas of this using the 2B pencil, as well as a pinpoint highlight being put in using the kneadable eraser. This area is then refined further using a 4H pencil. The 4H is one of the few pencils that I actually use sharp, and this is used for either very fine detail or to manipulate other darker tones. This pencil will stay sharp for a considerable amount of time, so I have to work very carefully using a minimal amount of pressure to avoid scratching the surface of the paper. With each step the level of detail increases, and things like fine patterns and striations which are found within the eye are slowly added. Also, as I've just said, this pencil can be used to manipulate a darker tone simply by working through it. Whether this to subtly and precisely blend out an edge or create some finer darker detail. I now want to create a transition between the skin surrounding the eye and the fur on the tiger's face. So to do this I'm going to use a 9H pencil. Just as with the 4H, this is used sharp and it will generally produce a very fine faint line. But when used through a darker tone such as surrounding the eye, this creates a transition by breaking up the edge between the two areas. Tone is applied and adjusted as well as adding texture. And to do this my favourite tool is the dart. And yes, it is actually a dart which is just reshaped on the end so it isn't quite as sharp. This is used to indent texture into the paper, and when a blunt pencil is applied over the top, this creates the effect of fur. All that happens is you use different patterns to create different effects. This is a very time consuming process, working in small areas at a time to slowly build the picture up. I will generally apply tone using a 2 and 4B pencil, and then this can be manipulated with either blending stump, kneadable eraser, or to create a transition between darker and lighter areas, I can always use the 4H pencil. By working between the different tools, this helps to give the fur a very tactile quality. The nose is another area of the picture which requires texture, but this time I can utilise the grain of the paper to create the effect of skin. After using the blending stump to create some shape, 2B pencil is lightly applied to the surface. This is done lightly, allowing the grain of the paper to show through, giving that appearance of a very subtle texture. I tend to do this quite randomly, as personally I feel this gives a more natural look. To create a darker, more speckled appearance in some parts, I use a 4B pencil and just dab this onto the paper. The nose is another key element to the final picture, so I will spend quite a lot of time to get this right. Earlier I blocked in some tone around the whiskers, and now it's time to return to this and add in some texture. This is even applied to the very darkest areas, as when 9B is eventually added, it will create a very subtle difference. Now this isn't something which is easy to see, but if somebody is looking at the original, then they can see this under close scrutiny, so I feel it's well worth doing. Tone is again added over the top using 2 and 4B pencil, but now I'm also starting to use 9B for the very darkest areas. Although I haven't done it yet, I will also apply the 9B to other areas of the picture as well, such as the pupil of the eye, but I'll tend to do this much later on in the picture's development. Adjustments to tone are made using the kneadable eraser, and then the whiskers can be cleaned out using the electric. I then use a sharp F pencil to just tidy up the edge of the whiskers. This manipulates the darker tone surrounding them to give a clean, sharp edge. When working on an area of fur, I always find it's important to concentrate on things like the length, direction, as well as how tangled it is. This is just something that you get used to, and the more you do, the more natural it becomes. Now there's still an immense amount of work to do, but so far I'm really pleased with how the picture's looking. But why not let me know what you think, and if you do have any questions then please feel free to ask. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.